This is the Capitol building of Tennessee here in Nashville. So we've shot a bunch of videos over here, videos about how bills become law, shot videos about specific bills that we wanted to get passed, some of which we actually did get passed. And this year I want to talk to you about basically just sort of the state of the union when it comes to gun control and gun freedom legislation, where things are at the state level, which is where I think things really matter, and also at the federal level because, well, that's kind of interesting and it plays a part. Essentially, there are two sides. If you look at America in the year 2023, you will see that there are a ton of states who really want to increase gun freedom for all of their citizenry, and they're doing it. And then you can see a bunch of states that would like to do the opposite of that, and they are trying to do that, which is where the federal government comes in, and we'll get to them in a minute. So in 2023, here's where things are at. South Carolina is just about to pass constitutional carry, and it's a pretty good bill. Florida is about to pass, I would say, a permitless carry bill, which is a little weird, but that's definitely sailing through. And then there is Nebraska, which is about to pass a bill on that exact same topic as well. Not quite as far along. West Virginia just got campus carry, and in that building right over there, people are discussing Tennessee's campus carry bill at this very moment. So yeah, there's a lot going on. And other states are doing the same thing, except for the non-freedom states. They're doing the opposite. So California has passed a bunch of new restrictions, and Illinois has passed a bunch of weapon bans and magazine bans, and even Oregon snuck in a ballot initiative in last year's midterm elections that banned magazines and then added a whole bunch of additional purchasing permit restrictions. But almost all of those things are stopped by judicial rulings. We actually got to help out on the Oregon one. There were a whole bunch of local folks that were able to file a lawsuit against the state of Oregon for trying to implement this Second Amendment violating bill. And we actually got to be part of the conversation in one of the hearings, and a judge put a hold on it. And the state of Oregon went to the Supreme Court and asked for them to overturn that injunction, that stay that was stopping them from actually putting this restriction into effect. And the Supreme Court said, no, this was just a week or two ago. The Supreme Court said, no, you already have all the tools that are necessary to make this decision yourselves. Go make the decision. And what they are referring to, almost certainly, is the Bruen decision. This is a decision that was handed down in June of last year by the Supreme Court. And they were specifically ruling on a New York case. They said that New York's firearm restrictions were violating the Second Amendment. They introduced a new test, and that is what all future firearm disputes of this type need to go through. They need to pass that test to determine whether or not they violate the Second Amendment. It's an extremely powerful ruling that has already had tremendous effects across a whole bunch of different states. States like California, a lot of California's gun rulings that they have had in the past that are extremely restrictive are actually being called into question by lawsuits that are being filed or already filed or being heard, or we're waiting for rulings on. Same is true of Illinois, same is true of Oregon, same is true of a whole bunch of different places. Even places that had friendlier firearm restrictions like Texas. Texas issued carry permits to their citizens at age 21. And thanks to a lawsuit and a ruling based on the precedent set by Bruen, Texas now has to authorize 18-year-olds to carry firearms because anything other than that violates the Second Amendment. And if you'll remember last year, right here in that building, we tried to pass some legislation that would have lowered the Tennessee carry age from 21 down to 18, Bill HB 1735, which made it through the House, but then it failed in the Senate, so we could not get that done. But then, just a few months later, the Bruen decision was handed down by the Supreme Court. And then a few months after that, a lawsuit was filed here in the state of Tennessee against the Tennessee. And just a few weeks ago, we got a ruling that said that, yes, 18-year-olds are allowed to carry. The state of Tennessee must recognize 18-year-olds' legal right to carry. So even when we have failed to do some of the legislative stuff that we had, we're actually seeing some judicial wins that are happening, thanks to circuit courts, district courts, even federal courts, because of this new ruling from Bruen. So that actually is a tremendous tool that I think totally changes the gun control and gun freedom landscape for the year 2023. And 2024 is going to be even more interesting. But wait, there's actually a bunch more 2023 stuff going on. while states are passing various rules, either to extend freedom or to try to take it away. After a whole bunch of things have been overturned, California's new experiment is to just put really, really expensive fees on all of the freedoms that they've been told they're not allowed to take away. There's a city in California that just rolled out a program that's like $1,000 in fees just to get your carry permit. They claim that that doesn't infringe upon anyone, but I don't know that that's going to hold up in court. But there's also another side to the federal thing. On the one hand, we have federal judges, Supreme Court justices, giving us significant tools to get more gun freedom back. But we also have, let's say, the ATF. They're a good example. The ATF this year and the end of last year were given a mandate by the Biden administration to crack down on a bunch of things. Also, people. And we're already seeing lawsuits against the ATF, against some of their rule changes being overturned. And there hasn't been a lot of time for all of these different lawsuits to be heard, but I'm really optimistic. For example, we had, and I think this is a really interesting indication of how things might go. A couple weeks ago, we had a ruling from Justice Connor down in Texas, and he was ruling on the ATF rule change that comes to frames and receivers and what firearms are, and that firearm parts are also firearms. He actually ruled that that was not the case, and that that particular ruling could not be applied to Defense Distributed or any of their customers. Now, this is a fairly narrow ruling, but the interesting thing is he didn't even cite Bruen. He didn't even cite West Virginia versus EPA. He didn't cite any of the federal precedent that really supports this case. We're seeing a very interesting trend. Not only are people inside of the firearm community getting better educated and having a better understanding of what's going on, but we're also seeing people outside of the firearm community knowing more about firearms and understanding them better, and even seeing a trend amongst judges saying that there are limitations to what federal agencies can do, even before we got some of this great precedent last year. And so, as we look to the future, the rest of 2023, rulings that we expect to see on the ATF pistol brace ban and various other things, I am cautiously optimistic. And I don't think that we should be in any ways complacent. The reason that we are making some of these strides and some of this progress is because of the work that has been done in the past. But we are seeing tremendous progress. So I want you guys to be encouraged. It's really easy to look at some of the permitless carry bills that were passed in Tennessee a couple of years ago, which we talked about, that are about to be passed in Nebraska and in Florida, and poke holes in some of the weaknesses of the text and in the code. But I want you to look at a bigger trend. In the mid-'80s, there were no states with constitutional carry, except for Vermont for some reason. But it's actually worse than that. There were no states that would absolutely positively give you a firearm carry permit if you asked. They might or they might not, depending on, things. But in the course of my lifetime, all that has changed. Now almost every state is a shall issue state. Those that are not are being dragged kicking and screaming into obedience to the Second Amendment. And 25 states have some level of constitutional or permitless carry. And by the end of this year, I think it's going to be 28. So even though we see a lot of saber rattling from the ATF, we see a lot of directives from the White House, from various very high-level federal legislators, the movement is very much in a different way. And it is because of people doing things at this local level. So I would encourage you to be encouraged and to continue to do stuff at the local level. And we'll continue to tell you about stuff that we're doing here in Tennessee and the way that it's working out. I actually am not sure how things are going in the other building, because we won't actually know what the end result of all of our efforts are until the dust clears at the end of session. But regardless of that, we do know which direction things are going in. And we're going to keep going in that direction as well.